Information. If it exists in writing, we print it. If it exists online, we update it. If it exists on mobile, we notify. If it exists in video, we show it. If it exists in audio, we play it. In the past, the news had to wait for a paper to print for it to happen. Today, news happens in real time. It's analyzed, edited, and published immediately by us, your neighbors, and of course, you. Wherever you are, you write, edit, give opinions, share photos, and make the news happen. This is why a paper needs to be on print, on screen, and on your phone. Wherever you are, your news has its pulse in the community. The Boca Raton Tribune. We are much more than just a newspaper. We are your closest neighbor.
And welcome to the Boca Raton Tribune Election Special, Tribune 360. In this election special, we'll be talking to every candidate running for City Council in the March 9th election. And today we are speaking with Josie Machovec, who is running for seat C in the election. Josie, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good, Pedro. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for coming on and talking to us a little bit and talking to everyone about what your base is and all the things that you plan on doing in City Council. So before we get started, just introduce yourself to us. Who are you, and how long you've been in Boca and things like that?
All the fun stuff. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the community through this format. So I'm in my mid-30s. I was raised in the greater Boca Raton area. So I've lived in West Boca, Delray, Boca, kind of all in this area. And when I was 19, I graduated. Well, I graduated high school at 18. At 19, I moved to Israel and I joined the IDF. I served 2 years as a Hummer driver in field training operations. I lived for a total of 5 years in Israel, and then I came back to the U.S. I met my husband. We got married. My husband works in tech. I had a career in sales and customer service. I worked for a company that was basically a technology company, and we sold a platform to car dealers. So I started as employee number 9. I worked my way up and helped to grow the company. We became an Inc. 500 fastest growing company in the US, wow. Number 1 in Miami. We were a Google partner. I received specialized training at the Google campus. And so I really worked hard in that. And then I worked for that company up until I had my second child. And then I decided to put my career a little bit on the back burner and stay home with my kids. I have 3 kids. They're 2, 4, and 6. And I get to be home with them right now, thankfully. And my husband, well, like I said, works in tech in a marketing type company. So awesome. A little bit about who I am.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess the question that people want to know is what made you decide to run for election, and have you had any experience in community or civic involvement throughout this time?
So I was raised serving in my community in any capacity that we could. In my religious organization, I taught dance and I organized groups for performances and plays. A few years ago, I actually organized my background is not, I have like a minor background in theater where I did community theater growing up, but I decided to take on a project for a fundraiser for an organization that fights against human trafficking. And with a team of people, I helped to direct a very huge 50-person cast play. And that was focused on slavery and human trafficking and that type of thing. And so I've done things like that. So nothing like I haven't served on any boards or committees necessarily. I've served on small committees where we organized, youth events, young adult events, things like that. So it's kind of just wherever I found a place that I could serve and be a part of my community, I always have. And what it kind of led into what made me want to run is just the next step in order to serve my community. I've seen over this last year how influential the local government is on our daily lives. And it kind of started very small with me just wanting to take my kids to the playground, but it really took me way deeper into what the local government is doing with the comprehensive plan and what we've seen written and what we've seen designed and the zoning, and then what we're actually seeing being built in the city and the disconnect between those and how that connects to what is happening in the city. So that kind of is what led me into it. And I felt like that the voice of the people is not necessarily being heard. I listen in on city council meetings and people call in, they voice their opinions on development that's happening in their neighborhoods. And we hear a lot of, thank you for your comment. Thank you for your comment. And then the city council does whatever they want. And it's a disconnect between the voice of the people and the direction that they want the city to go in and what the leadership is doing. And I think that in order for that gap to be bridged, there needs to be someone who is willing to take that step and be the voice of the people inside of government and to work for the people again.
So that's a perfect segue to the next question. Why is city government so important?
So city government, I mean, again, I was always raised like politically focused. I voted in every election that I could vote in, even when I lived overseas. I did absentee ballots. So my parents are very involved politically. Like I've always been aware, but I never really, I took civics. I was homeschooled actually. So my family had a very huge, my parents put a very large impact on history, civics, government, all of those kinds of subjects, like a lot more necessarily than is taught in public schools. So I did have a very deep understanding, but I still never really connected how deep it was to our daily lives, like things. So when the lockdown happened and the things like the playgrounds were closed and this was closed and this was closed, and I'd go to the city government and I'd say, okay, how can I take my kids to the playground? We've been in quarantine for a month now. We lived in a 2-bedroom condo with 3 children, 1, 3, and 5. They need to go outside. We need to go to the playgrounds. Like, we feel that it's safe enough for our kids. If someone is nervous, they can stay home. No one's going to make anybody do anything they're not comfortable with. So what can we do to work together to make sure that everyone in the community is happy and safe? And I was just met with such blank looks, quite honestly. And the city told me to go to the county. The county wasn't super interested in helping and to achieve that. And it kind of just led me more and more into looking into what's the city doing, what decisions, the things like the traffic, a lot of things that we might complain about, the city government has a huge influence in. And I don't know that we always make that connection. And so I think that we as citizens really need to make that connection. And for me, I'm speaking to myself too, that to make that connection and then take the steps necessary to make our voices heard in our opinions in the city. So one of my goals with running is to, again, with that bridging that gap, is to also try to encourage and encourage and encourage people to take more of a part in our local government and voice their opinions more. But when people feel that their opinions are not being heard, they quit speaking them. So if we can give the people back their opinion and give the people back their voice and the government listens to it again, then that would create a much more, I think, symbiotic relationship between the people and the government. And we can actually all really love. I mean, everyone who lives in Boca loves Boca for the most part. I mean, you don't live in Boca if you don't love it here. But we need to maintain that love. And that helps when there's that connection between the local government and the people.
That's good. So let's jump to this. Is there anything that city council is currently doing that, if elected, you would try to change immediately?
So that's a great question. There are a few projects that I would like to look into a little more. One of them being the 4th Avenue project with the student housing. I think there are a lot more questions that need to be asked and answered before that any ground is broken on that development and any decisions really go forward. So there are a lot of questions that I have. I mean, obviously not being in the council and not being on the committee, I'm not privy to some of the answers. Maybe they have asked these questions, but they're not necessarily sharing them with the community. And I think I've spoken to a lot of residents who live in that area, and they have a lot of questions and they have a lot of issues and they don't feel that their voices are being heard. So that's definitely one that I would want to look into more and see if that I can dig into a little bit more and see get some of those answers first, so that, again, if they do decide to go forward with that project, there is stipulations and there are things that can make the community that live in that neighborhood, again, comfortable with what's happening in their neighborhood. So that's one. I'm like thinking, there are a few. I mean, there's a lot of projects that are going forward that I would want to look into. Some of them are beyond what I think we would be able to stop and look at. I think there are definitely ones that are that people have concerns about that I would want to listen to and say, okay, well, what can we do to look at that? So that's the big one that I have like off the top of my head. But if you have more specific ones that I could speak on, I would be happy to.
No, just wondering if you had any from your head. So that's perfect. Yeah. So I'm gonna jump a little bit to some questions that I feel like have been asked for as long as we've been around, since 2010, covering the city. What are your thoughts on the parking issue in the city, and how can we make that better? Maybe with parking, maybe it's traffic. Those two things it's like a staple, right? Boca, parking, traffic. So how do you think that would be, like, what's something that you would do to try to resolve that?
So what I would really like to see done is kind of go back to the foundation of the plan for the city, the comprehensive plan, and see if there can be some rewriting done of it. Because basically what's happened over the last few years is they've cherry picked the things that they want to keep and the things that they want to change. And then they've said, okay, we're going to put a building right here. But then they haven't necessarily looked at the traffic, or if they do traffic studies, they do the traffic study during the summer when and they conclude that the traffic's not going to be impacted by this project because they did a traffic study during the summer when there's no snowbirds, when there's no one going to school, when work schedules are a little bit off. People, like, that's not the normal life here in Boca. So I think that there needs to be some of the foundation questions need to be asked, like you're asking now, but I think it needs to go back to a broader picture of what direction do we want the city to go in, and what can we do to repurpose buildings that maybe we can change to be parking structures. So I was looking at sorry, I keep kicking my table, the commercial real estate industry. So a lot of businesses are embracing the work from home model. I know, for like example, my husband's company, he had an office in a 4-story high rise over by the mall, and his company is not going to renew their lease on that in that office. They're working from home indefinitely. And so now that office is going to sit empty. Are they going to be able to bring in more companies to work there? I don't know, because a lot of companies are embracing the work from home. So what can we do? Like, what can we do to repurpose some of these buildings, and how does that impact things like parking and traffic? Because now those parking lots are maybe going to be sitting empty for that building. Can we adjust them to be parking for somewhere else? So I think that looking at the comprehensive plan and looking at the future of where we're going post pandemic and post all of these lockdowns and all of the changes that are happening in the economy, I think there's a lot of room to make those adjustments. But I think the right questions need to be asked of, like, what can we do with the comprehensive plan? And then where does parking, traffic fit into that? Instead of saying, let's just take this one piece and address it, let's put it back in the puzzle and redo the whole puzzle. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And talking about traffic and parking, what are your thoughts on the ever-growing population of FAU, as we kind of touched a little bit earlier? And what are some ways that you think the city can is able to retain these students once they graduate? Because what we see now, right, is a lot of people go to FAU, they graduate, they leave the city. What do you think the city could do to keep these students locally for longer?
That is a huge question. And it's something that, again, going back to the comprehensive plan adjustments that I would want to do, is to take that into consideration, because I think a lot of the reasons that people don't stay in the city is cost of living is very high in the city. And I know this as a family with 3 young children, we make the average median household income for the city of Boca. So we're, very normal, which is higher than a lot of the county. It's higher than a lot of other places, but it's still like a normal level of income. And we're having a hard time being able to buy a house right now. So someone who just graduated with student debt and is just starting their career, they're definitely not going to be able to purchase a house. So I think that, again, we're looking at adding student housing for students who are transient. But what is the city doing? Are they looking at plots of land to where they can build potentially more either single family homes or multifamily homes that are going to work with the aesthetics of the neighborhood? I'm not saying let's plop them down in a neighborhood where it's not necessarily going to work, kind of what I think they're doing with Pine Circle. That's another conversation. But I think that they need to go back to that drawing board. And again, going back to what I'm saying about rewriting the comprehensive plan, that would be a question that's addressed. I would like to see everyone have a seat at that table for those conversations, families with young children, students, and then young professionals just starting their careers, as well as retirees, because we have those demographics in all of the city. And I think that not everyone in the city, including that group that you're talking about, feel that they have a seat at the table for the conversation about the direction of the city and what their contribution and what they're going to be able to give and get out of the city. So kind of going back to rewriting the comprehensive plan would address some of those questions, so we can see, okay, well, this is what we have and what can we do to make that work for those groups as well.
So you talked a little bit about how one of the main reasons you decided to run is because of COVID-19 and seeing the playgrounds and with your kids. How do you feel Boca has done during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how will you assist City Council moving forward should you be elected and trying to get life back to quote unquote the normal?
So I think that the city has done a decent job. I mean, I am always someone who's looking, and there's always room for improvement. And, it was nobody knew what was going on. There was a lot of unanswered questions. And I think that once answers to questions started to come in, I think there could have been a little more effort to help some of our businesses. I've spoken to a lot of business owners, and whether they were able to receive PPP or not, a lot of them haven't even received a phone call from the city. So just checking on them. And so I would have liked to have seen maybe the city. And again, I don't know what went on behind the scenes. We only know what, because I'm not in the city government currently. So if I were in, I would have liked to have seen some type of task force or organization where we could have had people contacting every single small to medium to large business in our community to make sure, are you guys doing okay? How can we help? What can we do? Can we connect you with bankers to help you with the PPP? Can we connect you with this? So I think that happened to some degree, but I've spoken to a lot of businesses where it didn't happen at all. And I think that that is a little bit of a ball drop on our part, because if these small businesses shut down and they're not able to open their doors, that's going to impact our tax base as far as it comes, when it comes to commercial property taxes. It's going to affect our population, because some of those people might have to move out of the city, and it's going to affect our just overall morale and economy of the city if our small businesses are closing. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more connection to the small businesses in that manner. And that's something that if I'm elected, that I would like to work towards, is making sure that they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel their needs are being evaluated to the best of the city's ability, and making sure that we're attracting, if we can, more and more businesses.
So if you had to pick three campaign issues that you are like your main three things, what would they be and why?
So we kind of talked about them a little bit, a couple of them. One is the comprehensive plan and rewriting it, and giving everyone a seat at the table, and making sure that we're working with all the demographics of the people of the city to make sure that it is a city that we want it to be. I mean, there's a lot of things happening in the city that a lot of people are not happy about, and their voices need to be heard, and we need to find the balance in making sure that the city is the city that we all love, and stays the city that we all love. So that's one. The other is the economic recovery from COVID-19. So working with the small businesses and the medium to larger businesses as well, and making sure that they're getting their needs met as best to our ability, and helping with the community, connecting people in the community with those businesses as best as we can. And then the third one is what I like to call a practical sustainability. So one of the things I noticed strongly also with COVID-19 is how fragile our food supply chain is, especially here in Boca. We're not out west where there's a lot of farms. We're not south where there's like pastures and things like that. And so if our food supply chain, if there's something that happens, our food supply, we're going to be hurting here in the city. We're not going to be getting the trucks to come in to give us the food that we need. And we're not self-sustainable at really a lot of places. I know we have things like a community garden, but that's only going to go so far. So I would like to see projects where we could help encourage residents who are interested in having a small tomato farm on their property, or a tomato patch on their property, or things like that, where we can encourage more sustainability when it comes to our food supply chain, as well as repurposing buildings, as I talked about before, when it comes to the commercial property. Okay, so if this building is just not going to be used as an office again, what can we do with it where we can repurpose it into something that will be a revenue maker, as well as something that will add to the city in both revenue as well as aesthetics and, arts and leisure and that kind of stuff. So those are the three things.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. What do you feel are your strengths and how they would help city council?
So I love this question. My strengths I like to work with people. So I like to talk to people. I keep saying over and over again to my husband and my team that one of my favorite parts about this whole campaign is the opportunity and almost the excuse to connect with and meet with people in the community. We don't necessarily get to do that, especially in the time of COVID, where we're really talking to a lot of people and really kind of have that reason and excuse to chat with people. And so I really love working with people. So I think the fact that I enjoy that is a strength, because it means that I want to hear what the people have to say, and not just in the government, not just in the community, but also the people who are working in City Hall, the people in the city council, the current council members and the mayor. I want to hear what they have to say and connect with them and build relationship with them so that we can move forward with things for the city. So that is one area of my strength. I think that I have ideas that are a little bit on the fresh side. I'm looking at other communities in the area and seeing what they're doing, things in downtown West Palm. What are they doing with repurposing some of their buildings? How are they shifting into this new work, play, live concept? And what things are they doing right, and what things are they doing wrong that we can take and then apply into our own city? Del Rey just rewrote its comprehensive plan. So one of the first things I would want to do is to chat with them. Same thing. What worked, what didn't work in your process of rewriting the plan. So the fact that I have those ideas and those are the things that I would like to try to do, and based off of the conversations that I've had with people in the community, that's what a lot of people in the community are wanting as well. So I think those are some of my strengths. I'm pretty stubborn also. So I think you have to have some level of stubbornness, but I also, because I am a people person, I know when to give as well. So I think that having both of those is I'm going to be committed to the things that I've committed to doing and not going to really give those up if they're really, the really big things. So I think those are some of the strengths that I would bring.
Awesome. Thank you. What do you think, what do you think of the position? Like, what's your positioning on expanding the service boundaries of the city?
Ooh, that's a good one. You're actually the first reporter who's asked me that one. I've been waiting for that question and no one's asked me. So yay. I honestly have mixed feelings about it. I think that we would need to, I think it's a little bit more of a complex question than saying I think we should or shouldn't do it.
Right.
I think that there needs to be some in-depth conversations again with the people in those communities. Some of those residents who live right outside of the city limits that would be affected by this, they might have purposefully not purchased a home in the city limits because they didn't want to have to follow the city ordinances or the city taxes or whatever it may be. And then through no fault of their own, suddenly they're now inside the city limits. So I think that if that's something that the city is going to strongly consider, there needs to be a lot of conversations that happen in the neighborhoods that will be impacted and affected, and make sure that the people in those neighborhoods want that change. Because if we just do it, I think that that's a little bit of an overreach of government. I mean, because people didn't purchase a home in the city for a specific reason. And I think that needs to be explored further, and then that question can be answered a little bit more. So I would support the exploration of that for sure. I wouldn't necessarily say we should or should not do it in this very moment. I think after those conversations, then that can be something that is discussed.
That's a very good point, and I actually never thought about it that way. So thanks for giving me that. So looking in the bigger picture, so not just these next 3 years, but what is your vision for the city for the future?
So I love this city. I'm choosing to raise my kids here. I was raised in this area, and I would love the city to stay, in my like idyllic world. I want the city to stay the beautiful tiny little town on the beach where we all just have like a little beach town and everything's just chill and relaxed, which I love that. Obviously, I know that places grow and there needs to be change and adjustments as times move forward and more people want to move here. And so I would really just like to see a balance in that process where a lot of people, I don't want to live in Miami Beach. I don't want to live in Fort Lauderdale. We live in Boca. And so I would like to see Boca retain its Boca-ness in that little gem by the sea. So as we move forward with growth and responsible development, what does that look like and how do we retain that? So I would like to see it retain its charm, retain its beauty. And what can we do to maintain that while we have responsible development is the big question. And I think that needs to be asked. But that's what I would like to see. I would like to see it maintain its Boca-ness.
That's awesome. Josie, before I let you go, I've been asking this question to everybody. It's not really related to their policies or anything like that, but it's a question I'd like to know from everybody. So you're not the first one, I'm not going to be the last. Okay. Who's a political figure you admire the most and why?
Oh boy. Now I'm going to tip because you don't want to say certain things. You don't want to tip your hand one way or another. It's a nonpartisan race. If I say I admire certain political figures, that's going to immediately put a color on my head, red or blue. So I will preface this by saying there are a couple that I admire. I was raised, I was born in the 80s and raised into the 90s. So my parents were Reagan people. And so I really admire how Reagan was able to bring together the country. I mean, when he was reelected with a huge majority of the vote. And I feel like there was a lot of unity in the country in that time period. And so regardless of what you agree with his politics or not, whatever he did, he managed to, I think it was probably one of the most unified votes that has ever, I don't know if it's ever happened, but like in modern history. And so I admire that a lot, that he had that certain quality that was able to bring the people from both sides of the aisle and both communities together. So I admire him for that. And I think I admire a lot of the strong women who have been coming into Congress. We've had the most women sworn into Congress than pretty much ever before. And a lot of them are very firm in their values. They were very firm in their opinions. And again, regardless if you agree with their opinions or not, from both sides, you got AOC, you got Lauren Boebert, you got all these different ones. They're still very passionate about serving their communities that they're in. And so I really admire that. And that's what I'm striving to do. I kind of look at that as an inspiration of, well, if someone with 4 kids can run and be in Congress, then me with 3 kids, I can run and serve my community in my city council. So I would say that those are the ones that I'm going to throw out there now.
Awesome. Josie, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us today. Guys, you're good. You guys, don't forget to go vote on March 9th. That is the day for voting. There's no early voting, so you can either vote by mail, right? Or go on March 9th to your voting booths just in your districts inside the city and get it done that way. Josie, thank you so much. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, if anyone has any other questions, my email address is josie@bocaneedsjosie.com, and I am more than happy to answer questions, good, bad, ugly. Shoot me an email. I'm going to be doing a meet and greet event this week, actually, on Wednesday at Tap 42 from 5 to 7. So if you'd like to come and ask me, well, again, whether you agree with me or not, I'd love to have the conversation of whatever it may be. So just throwing that out there. I want to be a voice of the people, and that includes all the people.
That's perfect. That's awesome. Guys, don't forget March 9th is election day in Boca. Make sure you go vote. Your vote does count. And so we'll hope to see you guys at the voting booth. For now, though, take care and have the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.